In the quiet of the ancient world, long before the rushing of modern clocks and the endless voices of restless cities, there was a man who gazed into the night and found within it visions that trembled with mystery. A man named Daniel, whose dreams carried him beyond the walls of empires into the heart of eternity itself. Imagine yourself now lying upon soft ground in a desert night, where the stars shine in countless brilliance above you, where the silence of the earth spreads outward like a great sea, where the only sound is the slow breath of the wind curling against stone and sand. It is within such stillness that Daniel once closed his eyes, and within such stillness that the heavens opened before him. He was a dreamer not because he sought escape, but because he was chosen to receive what lay hidden from other eyes. His story begins with captivity, with the weight of Babylon pressing upon his people, with the golden palaces of Nebuchadnezzar towering above the streets, and with the sound of foreign songs echoing in the courtyards where once only Hebrew prayers had risen. Yet Daniel, though far from home, found himself drawn into mysteries greater than kings, greater than kingdoms. Mysteries written not in stone tablets or scrolls of law, but in visions carried on the currents of sleep. In the stillness of the night, when the body grows heavy and the eyelids fall, he found that the veil between the mortal and the eternal thinned, and in that thinning, angels spoke, and dreams became messages, and the quiet of his heart was filled with images that trembled like stars reflected on water. Close your eyes as he once did, and allow the rhythm of the story to move you as softly as the rise and fall of your own breathing. Picture the flicker of oil lamps in a quiet chamber, their light dancing gently upon walls painted with shadows, the air warm with the hush of desert wind passing through narrow windows. Daniel lies resting, his mind drifting into that in-between place where waking thought dissolves and the voice of heaven becomes clear. He sees visions, vast and unsettling, of beasts rising from the sea, of kingdoms standing and falling, of thrones set in fire, of rivers flowing with judgment, and yet within these visions he also feels a strange serenity, for he knows that he is being carried by a power beyond himself, a power that holds all kingdoms and all nights within its grasp. The first great vision is of a statue, shining with layers of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, its form majestic yet fragile, its feet made of clay mixed with iron, and as Daniel watches in awe, a stone not cut by human hands strikes the statue, breaking it into dust that scatters upon the wind, and the stone grows into a mountain that fills the whole earth. This vision is not loud in its telling. It unfolds like a dream that deepens, like the voice of the earth itself, whispering that kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall. That power gleams like metal for a moment, but always fades, always crumbles, always returns to dust. And as you listen, let that vision rest upon you too, like a soft weight reminding you that all things pass. And yet there is something greater, something eternal, that grows silently even as empires collapse. Another night brings Daniel visions of 4 beasts rising from the sea, each one different, each one terrible in its presence, yet each unfolding slowly in the rhythm of a dream. A lion with wings, a bear raised upon one side, a leopard with 4 heads, and a final beast beyond description, iron-toothed and devouring, its horns breaking and reforming, its gaze filled with terror. Yet within the fear there is also calm, for Daniel knows that these are not random shapes, but the unfolding of time itself, the slow progression of kingdoms, the long weaving of history that leads inevitably toward the throne of the Ancient of Days. And as the vision continues, he sees that throne, white as snow, burning with fire, wheels glowing with flame, rivers flowing forth like light itself, and around it countless hosts stand, waiting in silence. It is judgment, but judgment described in the hush of eternity, not in chaos, not in noise, but in the quiet authority of a presence that cannot be moved. To listen to these visions is to feel the drowsy pull of inevitability. For just as Daniel could not stop their unfolding, neither can we hasten or slow the rhythm of destiny. The story moves forward like a tide, carrying us with it, soothing us with its certainty, reminding us that though kingdoms rage and beasts rise, the Ancient of Days remains, seated upon a throne unshaken, holding in his gaze all that was, all that is, and all that will ever be. Breathe with this image. Let it carry you deeper, as though the fire of the throne were not a consuming flame, but the gentle warmth of a hearth on a winter night, steady, eternal, inviting you into rest. Daniel's visions are filled with symbols, yet symbols meant not to confuse, but to reveal that behind the surface of history there is always a deeper pattern, a thread woven by hands unseen. And in this thought lies comfort, for if even the rise and fall of empires is guided, how much more is the path of each life cradled within that same weaving? To sleep with this assurance is to rest not only the body but the soul. Let your heart loosen its grip on the day. These visions were given in the quiet, and they are best received in the quiet. And tonight, that same quiet embraces you. If this story has begun to soothe your thoughts and ease you toward rest, you may gently, in your own time, choose to like this video. Leave a comment sharing what part of Daniel's visions stirs your own wonder. Share this with someone who also seeks peace, and subscribe so that each new journey may find you again. There is no demand here, no urgency, only the soft invitation carried on the same night wind that once whispered through Daniel's chamber. For now, let the visions linger, let the night deepen, and let sleep draw you softly into its embrace. Block 2. The Dreams of a Captive. When the book of Daniel first whispers its story, it begins not with visions of fire and eternity, but with the quiet sorrow of exile, with the hush of a people carried away from their homeland into the glittering power of Babylon, a city whose walls stretched wide and whose towers gleamed with gold, a city filled with sounds of celebration and the weight of conquest. Daniel was among those taken, a young man pulled from familiar soil and placed beneath the gaze of kings who believed their thrones unshakable. Yet even as he walked among foreign streets, even as he learned the tongue of Babylon and served in its courts, his heart rested upon the eternal. His prayers carried him beyond the rivers of captivity, and his nights became windows into mysteries hidden even from the rulers of empires. To lie still and imagine Daniel in this place is to feel the heaviness of displacement, but also the quiet resilience of faith, the certainty that even in exile the hand of heaven still guides, still speaks, still opens the veil of night to reveal what lies ahead. The first great vision Daniel interpreted was not his own, but that of King Nebuchadnezzar, who dreamed of a statue so radiant and vast that it filled the horizon of his sleep. Its head made of gold, its chest of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet of iron mixed with clay. The king awoke, troubled, unable to rest until someone could tell him not only the meaning but the dream itself, for he distrusted the voices of his wise men, magicians, and astrologers, who could weave words but not pierce truth. It was Daniel, carried by wisdom not his own, who stood before the throne and spoke softly of what the dream had shown. That the statue was the story of kingdoms, one after another, each shining in its season, each yielding to the next, each glorious and fragile at once. Gold would pass into silver, silver into bronze, bronze into iron, iron into clay, until finally a stone, cut not by human hands, would strike the statue, shatter it, and grow into a mountain that filled the whole earth. To hear this vision retold in the hush of night is to feel the weight of impermanence pressing gently upon the heart. Even the mightiest of empires, with walls wide enough for chariots to race, with palaces tall enough to kiss the stars, are no more than metals layered upon clay, destined to fall, destined to scatter like dust upon the wind. And yet within that truth lies comfort, for the mountain that arises is not fleeting, not fragile, not of human making, but of eternal promise. Daniel, a captive in a foreign land, became the voice that told a king his power was passing, his throne but one layer in a larger story, his reign temporary like the shifting of seasons. Imagine the silence of that chamber as Daniel spoke, the flicker of torches casting shadows on stone, the eyes of courtiers wide with unease, the king leaning forward, troubled but unable to deny the resonance of the dream. It was not only prophecy for a ruler, it was a lullaby for a captive, a reminder that even in the shadow of Babylon's walls, eternity still stretched, unbroken, beyond. And so Daniel's nights deepened. More dreams came, this time to him alone. Visions that carried him beyond the gilded halls into seas and skies filled with symbols of power and terror. 4 beasts rose from the waters, each one different, each one carrying the weight of kingdoms yet to come. The first was like a lion with wings of an eagle, proud and fierce, lifted and humbled in turn. The second was like a bear, raised on one side, with ribs in its mouth, devouring at the command of fate. The third was like a leopard, swift and many-headed, given dominion to cover the earth. And the fourth was a beast beyond words, iron-toothed, trampling, devouring, filled with horns, filled with terror, a vision so dreadful that Daniel trembled even within the dream. Yet as he watched, another figure appeared, not beastly but human-like, coming on the clouds of heaven, receiving authority and glory, a kingdom everlasting, unshaken, unending. Imagine lying in the silence of a night chamber, your breath slow, your body heavy, and seeing before your mind's eye this unfolding of empires, the rise and fall of powers that seemed immovable, yet all destined to give way to something greater. It is not a story of chaos but of pattern, not of despair but of inevitability. The beasts rise, the beasts fall, and above them all the Ancient of Days sits, robed in white, fire flowing like rivers from his throne, hosts of heaven standing in silent awe. Daniel, even as his heart trembled, found within the vision not fear but assurance, for the judgment was not in doubt, the end not uncertain, the everlasting kingdom already written into the fabric of time. As you listen now, let the images linger like stars upon your imagination. Picture the statue gleaming, then shattering, the beasts rising, then falling, the throne burning with light, the Son of Man receiving dominion. Each image is not abrupt, but slow, dreamlike, unfolding at the pace of eternity, carried into Daniel's heart in the stillness of the night. The same stillness surrounds you now. Your breath is steady, your body rests, your mind drifts into the rhythm of prophecy, not harsh, not chaotic, but like the tide of the sea, inevitable, unbroken, soothing in its constancy. And so, the dreams of a captive become the dreams of all who listen. Daniel's visions were not locked in the past, but carried forward, written to remind us that all things pass, that empires crumble, that kingdoms rise only to fall, but that above them all there is a throne unshaken, a mountain that endures, a light that cannot be dimmed. As you let yourself drift deeper into the calm of this narration, let that truth settle upon you, that what is eternal is never hurried, never threatened, never undone, and in that knowledge lies peace, the kind of peace that closes the eyes, softens the body, and carries the spirit gently into sleep. Block 3. The tree that touched the sky. In the long hush that follows a restless day, when lamps are lowered and rooms breathe with a softer darkness, imagine the great city of Babylon settling into its own quiet, the gates closed, the gardens sleeping, the river moving like a ribbon of dark silk beneath a faint moon. Somewhere within that stillness a king turned upon his bed, a king whose name had become a weight upon nations, a king accustomed to the quick obedience of thousands and the glittering certainty of palaces. Yet sleep, which bows to no crown, drew near with unhurried steps, and in its deep corridor the king passed from the pride of waking into the trembling clarity of a dream. The dream did not announce itself with thunder. It opened like a slow dawn inside the mind, a vision forming with the gentleness of mist and the inevitability of tide. He saw a tree, not a tree of grove or valley, not a tree one could measure with rope or span with outstretched arms, but a tree so vast it seemed to gather the sky into its leaves. A trunk rooted in the center of the earth, its crown lifting through clouds as if it drank light from the fields of the sun. Birds nested in its branches, beasts grazed in the shadow of its spread. Nations, like small caravans of ants, passed beneath its boughs and felt themselves sheltered by its nearness. Fruit bent the branches with abundance. Dew wreathed the bark with morning silver. The world, in that dream, felt fed and calmed by the single living pillar at its heart. The king watched, and for a breath all was harmony. Then a voice, clear as water and solemn as judgment, floated down through the leaves. Cut down the tree. In the dream a watcher descended, a holy messenger, bright and terrible, and repeated the word that bends mountains. Cut. Axes flashed like fragments of lightning. The trunk shuddered. Leaves fell in green rain. Birds wheeled upward in frightened spirals. Beasts scattered in dust. Fruit burst and darkened in the crushed grass. The great body of the tree gave way, slowly at first, then with dreadful grace, collapsing into a storm of wood and splinters, a forest's death in the fall of a single life. Yet the voice commanded also, leave the stump and the roots, bound with iron and bronze, in the tender grass of the field. Let him be wet with the dew of heaven. Let his portion be with the beasts. Let 7 times pass over him, that the living may know the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. The king woke with breath like a hunted creature, his hands cold, the room suddenly too narrow for a heart that had looked upon the unmaking of greatness. Courtiers came, wise men came, those fluent in symbols and practiced in the games of interpretation. But the dream was heavier than their tongues, larger than their confidence. It called not for cleverness, but for truth, not for crafted phrases, but for a listening soul. And so at last Daniel was brought into exile, the servant whose calm had often pierced storms, the man who carried in his gaze the stillness of shores beyond empires. The king told him the vision, voice steadying as frightened hearts steady when they borrow strength from telling. Daniel listened in silence, the way one listens to wind moving through tall grass, hearing both the surface and the hidden. And when he answered, the air in the room seemed to lean closer to hear. "O king," he said gently, "the tree you saw, great and strong, touching the heavens and feeding what lives beneath its boughs, this tree is you. Your greatness has grown and reached to heaven. Your dominion has extended to the ends of the earth. But the decree from the Watcher is sure. You shall be driven from men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. You shall be wet with the dew of heaven. Grass shall be your food. 7 times shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whom he will. Yet the stump bound with iron and bronze means your kingdom shall be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O King, let my counsel be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by righteousness, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the oppressed, that there may perhaps be a lengthening of your tranquility. There is a particular quiet that follows truth, a quiet not of emptiness but of weight, as if the world has paused to allow a word to sink to its roots. That quiet filled the chamber. It lingered in the folds of curtains and the seams of stone. The king dismissed the court with a gesture that was less command than tired acknowledgement. And life resumed its measured steps banquets, decrees, the measured pride of a city that mistook its height for immortality. Days braided into months. The river went on telling its silver story, indifferent to walls. The dream might have faded for others, but truth has its seasons. In an hour chosen by no human clock, the vision rose like a tide and broke. The king stood upon a high place surveying the breadth of his accomplishments. The temples and terraces, the ordered avenues, the gardens that fell in green cascades from tiered stoneworks that turned dust into wonder. Pride, a soft and deadly draught, warmed his throat. Is not this great Babylon, which I have built by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty? The words had scarcely finished sounding when another voice, older than cities, moved through the air as easily as wind through wheat. The decree fell, not as thunder, but as a certainty already unfolding. The kingdom departed from him. The heart that had commanded multitudes slipped from the circle of men and wandered in the field of beasts. Here the story does not rush. It walks with the slow mercy of time. The king's mind loosened. His hands forgot the grammar of the scepter. His feet learned the language of the open ground. Dew baptized him each morning. Night wind combed his hair into wild grass. His food grew where hooves had passed. 7 times years, seasons, cycles counted by no clock but by heaven's patience turned upon their quiet wheel. And the great lesson that had once been only a sentence in a chamber became a truth traced into bone and breath, that the Most High rules. No chain bound the king in those fields, except the chain of pride slowly unwound. No gate locked him away, except the gate of his own heart slowly opening. Humility, which men rarely choose, came by a path of dew and silence. Then, in a morning that felt like the first morning the world ever knew, his eyes lifted. Not to walls, not to gardens, not to iron or bronze, but to the sky, which had never once bowed to him and never once ceased to cover him. And he praised, not himself, but the one whose dominion outlasts all stone. Mind returned as gently as a migrating flock returning to a familiar tree. Servants found their king restored, not by medicine or counsel, but by worship, voice steady and new upon his lips. All whose works are truth and whose ways are justice. Those who walk in pride he is able to humble. The throne received him again, but the man who sat upon it was different by a width no measuring rod can hold. The city was the same. The heart was not. To retell this vision as night draws close is to let your own breath slow into the cadence of its wisdom. We are small before the sky. We are brief before the hills. Our towers are the foam of a wave before a cliff that has stood 1,000 years. And yet smallness is not starvation. It is relief. It is a loosening of the fist by which we hold what cannot be held. The dream of the tree is not merely a warning to kings, it is a lullaby for any soul that has carried itself too high and found the air too thin. Leave the stump, says mercy. Bind it with iron and bronze. Let dew be the teacher. Let time be the soft blade that prunes pride into fruit. In the long history of Daniel's nights, many images glow with fierce fire beasts and horns, thrones and rivers of flame, numbers measured by weeks and years. But the tree remains a gentler flame, a lamp set low to guide the weary back to what endures. Its leaves shade cattle and kings alike. Its abundance feeds the small and the mighty without favor. Its fall exposes how the world depends less on us than we imagine. And that final promise the stump left living whispers that judgment and mercy are not enemies. The axe bites, the roots remain, pride falls, breath continues. The field becomes a church without walls. If you rest your head now upon this story, imagine dew gathering quietly upon grass, bead by silver bead, while a humbled man lifts his eyes and remembers what his mouth once forgot. Imagine the watcher's decree still humming through the air, not as cruelty but as the necessary chord that returns a song to key. Imagine iron and bronze not as prison but as pause, the kind of pause that saves a life from breaking beneath its own music. And imagine, at the center of your own days, a stump patient, waiting, already pushing a new green toward the light it did not create. Daniel wrote these things not with the hurried hand of a scribe racing after rumor, but with the unblinking patience of memory and trust. He knew that empires are meteors brilliant, brief, and that the sky in which they burn is older and kinder than the men who name constellations after their victories. He knew that revelation comes clothed in the quiet of night, and that interpretation belongs to the one who speaks first and last. And he knew that the heart, like a kingdom, can be restored, not by proving itself mighty, but by admitting what the heavens have always known. Let the image of that tree linger as your thoughts slow and the tide of wakefulness recedes. Its shade is wide enough for your worries. Its fruit is heavy with the simple sweetness of being small. Its fall is not the end of goodness, but the beginning of truth. The dew is already forming. The watcher's words have done their work. 7 times are not forever. They are the turning of a wheel that brings a traveler home. And when at last your own eyes lift, not to what you own or command, but to a sky that keeps its blue without your help, peace will arrive with the quiet certainty of morning. In that certitude, bodies grow heavy, breaths draw long, rooms become seas upon which the heart floats without fear. The tree that touched the sky has fallen and yet lives. The king who devoured praise has been fed by grass and now sings. The prophet who stood in exile has watched truth take the long road through a human soul and win. And you, listening in the hush, may let this story do what stories given in night are meant to do. Ease the fist, cool the brow, draw curtains across anxious windows, and make of sleep not an escape, but a gentle agreement with the way the world is ruled quietly, justly, mercifully, by hands unseen yet always near. Block 4. The writing on the wall. The story drifts forward like a river that forgets no stone, carrying us into another night where lamps flicker in banquet halls and where laughter, wine, and music swell against ceilings painted with scenes of conquest. Babylon, still radiant, still proud, had lived long on the illusion that its walls, wide enough for chariots, were stronger than time itself. Within those walls, King Belshazzar gathered his nobles, his wives, his concubines, and ordered the vessels of gold and silver taken long ago from the temple of Jerusalem to be brought forth, not for reverence, but for mockery, so that he and his guests might drink from them while praising gods of gold, silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. The air thickened with incense and arrogance, with the reckless ease of those who imagine that judgment is only a word whispered to others. Yet eternity has ways of entering even the noisiest rooms, and in that night it entered as silently as a hand appearing out of air. Without warning, without herald, a hand emerged near the lampstand, its fingers moving with slow precision, writing upon the plaster of the wall words that glowed with authority, words that broke the rhythm of music and turned wine sour in the mouths of revelers. Silence spread, heavy and strange. The king's laughter curdled into trembling, his face drained, his knees knocked together. He called, as kings always do, for interpreters, for magicians, for enchanters, for those skilled in the crafts of symbols and spells, and promised purple robes and chains of gold and rank to anyone who could read what the hand had written. But though the letters blazed, no tongue among them could shape meaning, no mind could claim the secret, and the banquet hall, once full of noise, became a chamber of fear. Then, at the urging of the queen, Daniel was summoned, the exile whose reputation still whispered through the years. The man who had read the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar and told truths that courtiers dared not speak. He entered not with the trappings of power, but with the quiet weight of one who had stood before visions greater than walls and thrones. The king, pale and desperate, repeated his offer: wealth, rank, honor, if only the words could be read. But Daniel, unshaken, refused such gifts, for truth cannot be bought, nor prophecy silenced by chains of gold. He looked upon the wall, upon the words written by a hand not of flesh, and spoke softly yet firmly, his voice carrying like a calm tide through the hushed hall. M-E-N-E, D-E-K-E-L, Counted, weighed, divided, for words that stripped away centuries of arrogance, for words that turned palaces into sand, for words that no feast could sweeten. Daniel interpreted them not with cruelty, but with clarity. Meaning God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekalu have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Pers your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and Persians. The silence that followed was not disbelief, but the silence of inevitability, the silence of a door already closing, the silence of a tide already risen beyond the power of men to command. Imagine, now, lying in your own quiet chamber, hearing those words echo like the low tolling of a bell at night. Counted, weighed, divided. They are not merely judgments upon a king. They are the soft arithmetic of every life, whispered not to terrify, but to remind that time is not infinite, that hearts are measured not by crowns but by truth, that kingdoms built on arrogance fall as easily as sandcastles before the tide. Daniel did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Truth, when spoken with the authority of heaven, carries its own weight, heavier than stone, sharper than iron. And Belshazzar, though he clothed Daniel in purple and placed a chain of gold around his neck, though he proclaimed him third ruler of the kingdom, could not stop the sentence already written. That very night, history turned. Babylon, city of pride, was given into the hands of others, its gates opened, its throne overturned, its revelers silenced forever. The vision of the writing on the wall is not told as thunder or fire, but as handwriting, delicate, precise, almost tender in its form, yet unyielding in meaning. To meditate upon it is to realize how softly judgment may enter a hand tracing letters upon plaster. A silence falling where once laughter reigned, a heart trembling because eternity has brushed against it. For those who listen now in the hush of night, the story is less a threat than a lullaby of truth. That pride has limits, that time is measured, that what is eternal cannot be mocked. The kings of earth may drink from golden vessels, but the gold is not theirs. The breath in their lungs is not theirs. The years of their reign are not theirs. All is gift, all is counted, all is weighed. And in that awareness lies not terror, but peace. For the same hand that writes judgment writes mercy. The same eternity that numbers days also plants roots that endure. As you let your body sink deeper into rest, let those words settle over you like a soft blanket. Counted your days are not infinite, but they are known, and in their brevity lies their sweetness. Weighed you are not measured by crowns or palaces, but by the quiet honesty of your heart, by the mercy you extend, by the humility you keep. Divided, what seems strong and permanent will one day be broken and shared. But beyond division lies the eternal kingdom that cannot be shaken. The writing on the wall is not only the end of Babylon, it is the beginning of peace for those who yield to what is greater than themselves. So now, close your eyes as Daniel once did, as Belshazzar once did in his last night, and let the rhythm of the story carry you. Lamps flicker, plaster glows. A hand writes slowly. Silence deepens. Let your breath follow the slowness of the letters, each one traced like a lullaby upon the walls of your own thoughts. And as you drift further toward sleep, remember that judgment, when it comes from eternity, is not noise but silence, not cruelty but truth, not chaos but the quiet certainty that what is weighed is known, and what is divided makes way for what endures. Block 5. The beasts and the Ancient of Days. Night after night the visions deepened, not like sudden storms that tear through a land and leave ruin in their wake, but like tides, slow and irresistible, advancing across the sands of Daniel's mind until the familiar ground of sleep became an ocean where eternity itself breathed. One such night came heavy with silence, the kind of silence that feels older than cities, older than kings, older than words, a silence so full it seemed to listen. Daniel lay still, and in the darkness the sea rose before him, not a sea of calm, blue horizons, but a sea restless with wind, its waters churning as though the very breath of heaven stirred its depths. And from that sea, in the heavy quiet of vision, rose shapes, one after another, beasts unlike any the earth had yet known, each carrying within its form the shadow of empires yet unborn, each rising not in noise but in inevitability, as if the future itself had taken on monstrous skin to show its truth. The first beast rose like a lion, golden and fierce, but its wings were those of an eagle, wide, proud, soaring above the waters before being plucked away, leaving it to stand upon its feet like a man. A heart of flesh given in place of the wild. Its majesty trembled with both strength and fragility, like kingdoms that roar for a moment and then learn humility in the soft unraveling of their pride. The second beast followed, slower, heavier, a bear raised up on one side, ribs clenched between its teeth, commanded to rise and devour much flesh. It lumbered forward, unhurried, yet inevitable, carrying in its massive body the weight of conquest and appetite. An empire vast and consuming, its breath slow but relentless. The third was swifter, a leopard with 4 wings upon its back and 4 heads upon its body, moving like wind across the face of the earth, given dominion far and wide, its speed more terrifying than the bear's strength, its multiplicity more unsettling than the lion's roar. It darted through the dream, a flash of power spreading in all directions, a kingdom stretching its shadow over continents as easily as wings stretch across a sky. But it was the 4th beast that stilled the breath within Daniel's chest, for it rose beyond comparison, a form so terrible that words faltered before it, iron teeth devouring, claws tearing, stamping, trampling, breaking apart what it touched. It bore 10 horns, and even as Daniel's gaze lingered, another horn rose among them, small yet arrogant, uprooting 3, its eyes like the eyes of a man, its mouth speaking great things, swelling with pride, its voice louder than nations, heavier than armies. The vision did not rush. It lingered, forcing Daniel to look, to see, to bear the dread of inevitability. And yet in that dread lay also the whisper of certainty, for as terrible as the beast was, it too belonged to the rhythm, to the tide, to the pattern of rise and fall already written in eternity's hand. Then the vision shifted, not abruptly, but with the gradual turning of the earth toward dawn. Thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. Imagine the silence of that moment, a silence deeper than seas, more enduring than stone, the kind of silence in which hearts forget to beat. His clothing was white as snow, pure and luminous, his hair like wool, ancient and unchanging, his throne flames of fire, its wheels burning, streams of fire flowing forth, surrounding him with light that was both fierce and gentle. Thousands upon thousands attended him, 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. Not in noise, but in reverent hush, each presence absorbed into the gravity of the one seated. Books were opened, their pages alive with the record of ages, and the judgment was set. Against the roar of beasts, against the arrogance of horns, against the trampling of iron teeth, the Ancient of Days remained unshaken, unmoved, enthroned in light that no kingdom could dim. Daniel's heart trembled within the dream, yet even in trembling he felt peace, for he knew that beasts may rise and beasts may fall. But the Ancient of Days does not rise nor fall, he simply is. His throne is not built upon clay, not forged of bronze or iron, not balanced upon horns, but founded upon eternity itself. And as Daniel watched, the 4th beast was slain, its body destroyed, its dominion removed, its terror ended. The others too lost their power, allowed to linger for a time but stripped of rule, shadows of what once had been, their voices fading like echoes in a vast cavern. Then, through clouds, came one like a son of man, approaching with calm authority, carried not by armies but by the very heavens, receiving from the Ancient of Days dominion, glory, and a kingdom that would not pass away, a kingdom unshaken by time, unbroken by conquest, everlasting and serene. To meditate on this vision is to let yourself be carried by its rhythm, slow and solemn, like the movement of stars across a night sky. The beasts rise, each terrifying in their turn, yet each already fading even as they roar, for their dominion is borrowed, their time measured, their power passing. But above them, beyond them, before them, after them, sits the Ancient of Days, robes white, throne burning, judgment certain. And to the Son of Man is given what no beast can take, an eternal kingdom, gentle and enduring, where dominion is not devouring but healing, not trampling, but lifting, not fleeting, but everlasting. Daniel, lying in exile, trembling at beasts, yet resting in the vision of the throne, found in this image not only prophecy, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing that beneath the tumult of history flows a current unbroken, guiding all things toward a horizon already set. Now, as you listen in the softness of your own night, let the imagery unfold around you. Imagine the sea, restless yet ordered, giving rise to beasts that embody the strength and fragility of nations. Imagine the throne, blazing with fire yet soothing like the warmth of a hearth. Imagine the Ancient of Days, his presence vast yet tender, his gaze encompassing all. Imagine the Son of Man, gentle yet glorious, receiving dominion not as a conqueror who takes, but as an heir who is given. His kingdom not built upon violence, but upon eternity. And as you rest in these images, let your breath slow, let your heart loosen, let your body sink deeper into the quiet. For the beasts have their time, but the throne has no end, and the Son of Man reigns not in terror, but in peace everlasting. This vision, drawn in the silence of Daniel's night, is not merely the history of empires yet to commit, is the lullaby of every restless soul. For just as beasts rise in dreams, so to rise fears in our lives, terrors with iron teeth and horns of arrogance. Yet above them all sits the Ancient of Days, untroubled, unshaken, and to him belongs the final word, the final light, the eternal rest. And so, as sleep draws near, let this vision become your own, that the sea may churn, but the stars remain, that beasts may rise, but they always fall, that the Ancient of Days still sits enthroned, and that his kingdom, given to the Son of Man, is already here, already waiting, already sure. Block 6. The Ram and the Goat. There are nights when the mind drifts into a plain so wide and clear that even distant mountains seem like soft folds in a mantle laid gently over the earth. And in that unhurried expanse, Daniel found himself again, not by the will of his feet, but by the current of vision drawing him as a slow river draws a fallen leaf. And the scene before him opened as quietly as morning mist lifting. The banks of a palace canal in Shushan, shimmering as if all stone remembered water, and beyond the slow gleam of that water, a field of time so still that any sound would have felt like a disturbance, any movement like a thought that had not yet learned to speak. And into this stillness came first a ram, not the timid creature of field and flock, but a ram crowned with 2 horns that rose like crescents toward a pale sky, one horn higher than the other, and the higher one ascending last as if history itself had layered strength upon strength. And the ram pushed westward and northward and southward, pressing its weight through this silent world as emperors press seals into wax, and nothing could stand before it. No beast could resist, none could deliver from its power, and it did as it pleased and grew great. And yet even in that greatness there was the faint hush of a boundary, the suggestion of a shore that all tides must meet, because in visions, as in the sea, even the most confident wave remembers it must eventually bow to land. Then, in a breath as soft as a feather falling, another shape approached from the west. A he-goat, moving so swiftly it seemed to skim the surface of the earth without touching it, speed made into a body, intention made into a gleam, and between its eyes a single conspicuous horn, not the twin crescents of the ram, but one bright spear of purpose. And the goat came toward the ram with a fury that was cold rather than hot, a precision that was wind rather than flame, and it broke upon the ram with a collision that made no sound in the room of Daniel's sleep, only a widening clarity like a lens turning, and the horns of the ram were shattered. Its strength poured out like water tipped from a bowl, and there was no one to deliver it, and the goat stood triumphant, breath steady, dominion widened. And for a long moment the field of the dream held still as a held note, the air around victory clear as glass, until the principal horn of the goat, the very symbol of its swiftness and surety, lifted itself higher than pride, and in that lifting fractured, not with noise, not with drama, but with the inevitability of a fruit overripe in late summer, and 4 other horns sprang up toward the 4 winds of heaven, lesser lights around a vacancy, corners of a compass where certainty had once been a single star. It is the way of dreams that after one stillness another begins, and from one of the 4 horns there grew a little horn. Not terrifying at first glance, not a storm, not an iron mountain, just a narrowing thing. A blade of ambition that lengthened almost without being seen. And it grew toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. And it magnified itself even to the host of heaven, and cast down some of the stars, and trampled them. Not because stars can be harmed, but because arrogance loves symbols, and the dream grants them. And it exalted itself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down, and truth was flung to the ground, and practiced and prospered as if prosperity were the same as permanence. And a question rose in the dream, not as sound, but as a tenderness bruised. A voice asking how long these transgressions would be allowed to dim the lamps of worship. How long the evenings and the mornings would be counted under a shadow. And the answer came with the calm of mathematics, spoken by an angel's breath, that there would be 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary would be cleansed, not by noise, not by armies, but by the return of truth to its place, like a stream returning to a bed from which it had wandered in flood. Daniel lay within the vision as a boat lies upon water, weight surrendered to a larger holding, and as he watched the forms that had moved so grandly begin to soften at their edges, the air itself thickened with meaning, and a presence approached, not a beast, not a king, but a messenger, Gabriel, whose nearness was not loudness, but clarity. The way a window in winter makes the world sharper by the cold, and he was told gently to understand, to know that the vision belongs to the time of the end, 2 days far off from the candlelight of his room, and yet as present to the eternal as the breath Daniel drew in that moment. And the messenger named the ram for what it was, Medes and Persians braided into one body with uneven strength, and the rough goat for what it was, the king of Greece, whose notable horn was the first king, and whose breaking would be followed by 4 kingdoms, not with his strength, and out of one would come a king of fierce countenance, understanding dark sentences, prospering in deceit, destroying the mighty and the holy people, magnifying himself in his heart, and by peace destroying many. And he would stand up against the prince of princes and be broken without human hand, a sentence that fell like a feather and yet weighed more than iron, because all things that are broken by no human hand are broken by the hand that holds worlds. To listen to Gabriel is to feel the air become a patient teacher, every symbol invited to take off its mask and breathe. And even as the meanings gathered like soft rain upon dry ground, Daniel felt the ordinary human tremor of one who has been shown a map too vast to carry, the way the eyes ache when they have stared too long at stars. And he grew faint and was sick for certain days, because truth, even when it is gentle, asks much of the body that hears it. And after the days passed, he rose and did the king's business, because the world does not stop for visions. Fields must still be walked, letters still sealed, bread still broken, and yet the vision remained like a fragrance in his garments, a low music under every task, and he kept the matter in his heart, not because secrecy is a virtue, but because some knowings ripen in silence, and to speak too quickly is to pluck what is not yet sweet. This ram and this goat, this breaking and these 4 winds, this small horn swelling until it touches the sacred, They breathe in the mind like slow tides, returning again and again. And in their returning, they calm rather than agitate. Because the rhythm beneath them is not the rhythm of panic, but the rhythm of a hand turning pages in a book already written. And in that book pride rises, blasphemy lifts itself, worship is halted, truth is cast down, and then a number is reached and a dawn opens. The sanctuary is cleansed, and the pretensions of the horn are gently undone by what no human hand can hasten and no human hand can hinder. If you let your breath follow this rise and fall, you will notice that fear loosens its fingers, because even the terrors here are terrors on a leash. Because even the terrors here are terrors on a leash. Beasts permitted to prowl only until a word is spoken, and the word words when it comes it will mend it be at. And the mend of the nine the lay and the men of Gend of Soai and the men of the bend of the men of BBB when but and and So let the images pass slowly before your inner eye, the ram pressing with its uneven horns, the goat slipping over the surface of the earth, as though the ground were a mirror, the proud horn splintering like ice in thaw, the four corners of command lifting in the wind, the small horn doing the work of shadows until the light grows too honest to ignore. And let Gabriel's naming drift through you like snow that does not bite but cools. Persia and Greece and the kings who walk as if stone cannot remember wind. And the moment when a sanctuary once darkened begins to breathe again and lamps find their flame. And suppose with Daniel that you return to ordinary duties, your hands on today's tools, your feet upon today's floor, and yet you carry within a softness toward time itself, because time, seen from this height, is a field well kept, and the keeper is not hurried and will not forget, and the keeper is not hurried and will not forget any corner, and will not forget any corey, and moan it men of it, and we not mend en of cand of skin of when of what so of and will be and so and what a plan what if she will be you been bull will be you be more and but it and but I quick I people about have a bow go of you about would you pick up the bow with a bow a bow power and war about by the word madame do the promote with the woman who would have been an omen. There is a comfort hidden here that belongs to sleepless hearts, the comfort of limits, the kindness of numbers, the mercy that even in ages of desecration there is an evening and a morning counted by hands that never lose their place. And when the count is complete, cleansing arrives with the same calm that counted not as an army storming a gate, but as a caretaking that sets every vessel back upon its shelf, and relights every wick, and opens windows to air, long held in, and the horn that once seemed to touch stars, is revealed again as a small thing that had been allowed to speak too loudly in an empty room. Rest in that revealment, the way a field rests after harvest, stubble shining, earth inhaling, the promise of rain somewhere beyond the ridge. And notice how your breath has already begun to match a truer tempo, slower, deeper, easier, as if your body remembered something your mind had almost forgotten, that history is not a storm without shores, but a sea ruled by lunar gentleness, and even dark tides must turn. Daniel's eyes, which had watched beasts and thrones, now close upon this plainer, place the canal, the water, the hum behind the world where angels speak, and he sleeps not from exhaustion alone, but from agreement, because to agree with the pattern is to become quiet within it, and you can feel that agreement growing in yourself as the room you are in grows softer and the edges of objects lose their impatience, and the hum of whatever machine keeps the air moving ceases to be a noise and becomes a pulse, and the pulse joins the slow movement of the ram and the swifter trace of the goat and the gentle arithmetic of evenings and mornings and the unhuman gentleness of a breaking that arrives without hands, and the peace that follows such breaking, which is the peace of things returned to their places. And when at last you drift past the point where thoughts keep their shape and into the place where shapes dissolve into warmth, the vision will still be doing its work quietly, smoothing out the creases of days that carried more weight than they needed to, reminding the small sovereign in your chest that it is enough to beat and be grateful, that the sanctuaries within you cleanse themselves best when you stop reaching for switches and let the lamps be tended by a wisdom older than sleep. And in that surrender you will understand, without words, what Gabriel taught Daniel with words, that the fiercest faces and the cleverest deceits and the most confident profanations exist under a ceiling they did not build, and the ceiling stands, and the ceiling is low enough to keep terror from the stars, and high enough to let hope see morning coming. Block 7. The vision deepens. Shadows of the ram and the goat. There are visions that do not end when eyes open, visions that continue breathing in the silence of a chamber long after the dream arises, visions that cling like incense to garments, turning even the simplest errands into reminders of eternity. The vision of the ram and the goat was such a vision for Daniel, a dream that was more than dream, a mirror that revealed not merely tomorrow but the rhythm of centuries, a pattern traced in horns and hooves, in victories and defeats, in the quiet arithmetic of heaven's will. Even after Gabriel's voice faded, Daniel felt the weight of the dream pressing upon him, like a tide that has pulled back but left every grain of sand marked with its signature. He rose to serve kings, to write decrees, to speak counsel, but within him the ram still pushed westward, the goat still leaped across the earth, and the little horn still lengthened with arrogance. And he knew that what had been shown was not a passing image, but a truth that would return again and again, until time itself acknowledged its fulfillment. Close your eyes now and let the vision deepen within you as it once did for Daniel. Imagine the canal of Shushan still shimmering, water dark as glass in the night, stars trembling upon its surface like whispers of a larger sky, and there upon its banks the ram once more, its horns uneven, its breath clouding the air. You watch it press outward, not in haste, but with the inevitability of an empire convinced of its destiny, and you feel the weight of its steps ripple through the earth beneath your own resting body. Then, from the edge of the horizon, the goat arrives again, swift as a shadow across water, horn shining like a blade of moonlight, and it collides with the ram in silence, breaking strength as if it were clay, scattering pride as if it were dust. And though you have seen it before, the scene does not diminish in repetition, it deepens, like waves that return always the same and yet always different, shaping the shore until stone itself softens. The great horn of the goat breaks, and four rise in its place, each one stretching toward a corner of heaven as if to stake a claim upon the winds themselves. And out of one of them, the little horn grows again, first small, almost forgettable, then swelling with quiet arrogance until it reaches the sanctuary itself. It tramples stars, it interrupts worship, it magnifies itself against the prince. It casts truth to the ground and prospers, and the heaviness of the vision presses upon you as it did upon Daniel, because in that swelling you recognize something that is not only history but humanity itself, the tendency of power to rise until it forgets its source, the temptation of arrogance to speak until it believes its own echoes, the shadow of pride that lengthens whenever light falls. And yet even here, even in the heaviness, There is the whisper of numbers, the assurance of measure. How long? The question rises, not in panic, but in the weary sigh of eternity itself. And the answer comes not with rage, but with clarity too. 1,300 evenings and mornings. A number exact, not endless. A boundary placed upon the arrogance of shadows. Time itself is revealed as a servant of mercy, counting not only days but limits, assuring that desecration, though it may prosper, does not prosper forever. Daniel heard it, Gabriel spoke it, and you now feel it in the rhythm of your own breathing. Each inhalation and exhalation a reminder that everything is counted, everything is measured, everything is bounded, and within those boundaries rests the assurance that cleansing will come, truth will rise, sanctuaries will shine again, truth will rise, sanctuaries will shine again, again shall where we will rewear with, el also once ago with, where I quill and we can and we will I be out of a hub, it be you will I be my you will we will I to bu, with our eyes. Of our we were of the Daniel's body trembled under the weight of this knowing, his strength drained, his skin pale, his breath heavy, and he lay sick for days, for the human frame is not built to bear so much eternity at once. And yet, when his strength returned, he rose and did the king's business, because the rhythm of heaven does not release us from the rhythm of earth. And the two must be walked together, visions by night, labors by day, eternity whispered in dreams, duties carried in daylight. This balance itself is a kind of prophecy, reminding us that the holy is not divorced from the ordinary, that revelation is not an escape from work, but a deeper meaning within it, that the sanctuary cleansed is not only in heaven, but also in the quiet faithfulness of a man returning to his tasks after angels have spoken. As you rest now, imagine Daniel walking the palace halls, parchment in his hand, words of decrees upon his lips, yet all the while the echo of the vision humming within him like a low music that never ceases. Imagine him looking upon kings with the calm knowledge that their horns are already numbered, their thrones already weighed, their reigns already measured. Imagine him listening to the boasts of courtiers, and hearing within them the faint echo of the little horn's arrogance, knowing that even the proudest speech will one day meet its limit. And imagine him alone at night, lying upon a bed in Babylon, staring at a ceiling of shadow, whispering prayers into the silence, his heart heavy but his soul steadied by the assurance that truth, though cast down, cannot remain in dust, that the sanctuary, though profaned, that be profaned, though profaned, will one day be cleansed, will one even devon defilal bound to be beyond mend of sevens so may in wall I and more and carindar and what do mau and bend of kunta kimber and weaker and wibber a with an and men per I alago a and oh I up and I power my power but you up you up a book bum to my This vision of the ram and the goat is more than history, more than prophesied, is a lullaby for restless souls. It reminds us that power is fragile, that arrogance has limits, that desecration cannot endure. It whispers that numbers are not cold but merciful, that limits are gifts, that endings are also beginnings. It assures us that the Ancient of Days does not lose count, that the Prince of Princes is never dethroned, that the sanctuary of truth, however shadowed, will shine again. And as you listen, as your breath slows and your body grows heavy, Let these assurances cradle you as they once cradled Daniel, turning visions of beasts and horns into the soft rhythm of inevitability, into the gentle knowledge that all things return to their rightful order in time. So let the images pass slowly through your mind once more: the ram pushing, the goat leaping, the horn breaking, the four winds spreading, the little horns swelling, the sanctuary shadowed, the question asked, the number given, the cleansing promised. Let them pass like waves, steady, unhurried, each one carrying you deeper into rest. And as you drift, remember that what terrified Daniel also soothed him, that what shook his body also steadied his soul, that what left him faint also left him faithful. For this is the nature of visions: they overwhelm, but they also heal. They terrify, but they also calm. They show the shadow, but they also reveal the dawn beyond the shadow. And now, as your eyelids grow heavy and your breath falls into the rhythm of sleep, let yourself be carried by the same tide. The ram and the goat remain, the horns rise and fall, the sanctuary awaits its cleansing, and the Ancient of Days still rules, unshaken, eternal, serene. And in that knowing, rest comes not as escape, but as agreement, not as flight, but as surrender, not as absence, but as the fullness of being held within a story that began long before you, and will end only in eternity's embrace. Block 8. The Arrogance of the Little Horn. There are dreams that speak in thunder, and there are dreams that whisper in the tones of patience. Dreams that do not shout their meanings, but let them unfold slowly, like a dawn that stretches its light inch by inch across the horizon until the whole sky is transformed. And among Daniel's visions, the one that returned again and again, pressing itself upon him with a persistence that was both burden and balm, was the vision of that little horn, small at first, hardly noticeable, yet swelling until it overshadowed sanctuaries and stars, daring to magnify itself against the Prince of Heaven. In the quiet rhythm of prophecy, it is always the small thing that grows beyond its measure, always the overlooked sprout that becomes a tower of arrogance, always the whisper that rises into a shout. And Daniel, lying still in the chamber of vision, was shown how even something that begins as less than others can bend itself into an instrument of desecration, carrying in its pride the ruin of nations. Picture the scene again as he saw it. The four horns standing at the corners of heaven like silent watchmen, each facing a direction of the wind, and from among them one horn, little, almost fragile, a mere splinter compared to the strength of others. And yet it lengthened, not in haste, but in insistence, like ivy creeping up the side of a palace wall, unnoticed at first, then suddenly covering stone with green shadow, and it grew toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land, swallowing territory not with the roar of beasts, but with the steady persistence of ambition. And as it grew, its arrogance grew with it, until it stretched even to the host of heaven, casting down some of the stars and trampling them. Not because stars can fall to earth, but because arrogance always imagines itself greater than what it cannot reach, always mocks what it cannot understand, always desecrates what it cannot own. And the little horn did more than swell in pride. It acted against the sacred itself. The daily sacrifice was taken away, the sanctuary was cast down, truth was flung to the ground, and deceit prospered. To Daniel the vision was heavy, for in it he saw not only empires, but the deeper wound of worship interrupted. The quiet lamp of devotion extinguished, the altar silenced, the sacred profaned by ambition that mistook itself for divinity. It was not merely kings rising and falling, but the desecration of the meeting place between God and man. And that wound in the vision was heavier than armies, darker than horns, sharper than teeth of beasts. The little horn magnified itself beyond what it was. and in doing so, it revealed the pattern of pride that has always walked in human history, the small rising beyond its measure, the fragile swelling into arrogance, the created seeking to rival the Creator. Daniel heard the question within the vision. How long? Not asked in rage, not shouted in panic, but whispered with the weariness of eternity itself, like a sigh from the stars that had been trampled. How long will the sanctuary be profaned? How long will truth lie upon the ground? How long will arrogance be allowed to strut across the stage of time? And the answer came, quiet as arithmetic, certain as the turning of the moon 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary shall be cleansed, not forever, not endless, not unmeasured. For all arrogance is given its season, and all desecration is permitted its time. But both are numbered, both are weighed, both are destined to end. To meditate upon this is to feel the drowsy peace of inevitability, the way a weary traveler rests when told that though the road is long, it is not without end, though the night is deep, the dawn is already certain. The little horn, for all its boasting, for all its desecration, is still little, still bounded, still subject to a hand not human, and when it is broken, it will be broken without hands, for pride undoes itself, arrogance collapses beneath its own weight. Desecration withers when the Eternal breathes. The vision shows not only the terror of arrogance, but the peace of its undoing. And to hold both at once is to find rest in the rhythm of prophecy, to see shadow and light woven together in a pattern that no horn, however magnified, can alter. Daniel trembled at this vision, his body weakened, his heart heavy, for to see desecration is always to grieve, even when one knows it cannot last. He fainted and was sick for days, carrying the weight of symbols too heavy for mortal flesh, and yet he rose again, served again, wrote again. For life demands its duties even from those who have seen eternity. And in this too lies a lesson, that visions are not escapes but invitations. Not departures from earth, but deeper engagements with it. Not burdens that crush, but truths that strengthen when borne with patience. Daniel carried the vision of the little horn not as a despair, but as a reminder that even arrogance bows to limits, that desecration cannot silence devotion forever, that truth may be cast down, but it always rises again, like dew lifting into dawn, like lamps relit after darkness. Now, as you lie within your own quiet chamber, let the rhythm of this vision lull you deeper into rest. Imagine the little horn swelling, its arrogance lengthening, its shadow covering stars, its voice filled with pride. Imagine the sanctuary silenced, the lamp extinguished, the altar desecrated, and then imagine the question whispered, how long? And the answer given, 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary shall be cleansed. Let that number soothe you like the counting of a shepherd over his flock, like the turning of beads between fingers, like the rhythm of breath itself. For what is numbered is already bounded, and what is bounded is already passing, and what is passing cannot endure against eternity. So let your breath slow as you picture the sanctuary cleansed, its lamps shining again, its altar restored, its truth lifted from the ground. Picture the arrogance of the little horn dissolving, not in noise, but in silence, broken without hand, humbled by the Eternal. Picture Daniel himself, lying weak upon his bed, rising again to serve, carrying within him the quiet knowledge that arrogance is always temporary, that desecration is always undone, that truth is always restored. And as you rest within these images, let them carry you into sleep, for they are not threats but lullabies, not chaos but order, not despair, but the assurance that in time all things return to their rightful place. The little horn grows, desecrates, prospers for a moment, but only for a moment. And then the Ancient of Days breathes, the Prince of Princes stands, the sanctuary is cleansed, and truth rises like dawn. In that rhythm, eternal and unbroken, you may let go of your own burdens, your own fears, your own restless thoughts, and be carried into rest as Daniel was carried, into the arms of visions that whisper not of endless night, but of morning already written into the stars. Block 9. The cleansing and the quiet return of light. There are seasons when the world seems to hold its breath at the end of a long count, when the quiet between one number and the next feels like a doorway opening. And in Daniel's vision, that doorway was named with evenings and mornings, not to exhaust the heart with arithmetic, but to cradle it in the assurance that desecration does not write the last line, that shadows are timed, that even the silence of the altar is measured by a gentler hand, and when the measure is complete, the sanctuary breathes again, not with trumpets and clash and the noise of armies, but with the soft industry of care. The way dawn enters a room through a seam in the curtain and turns everything back toward its true color without waking the sleeping too quickly. And so the cleansing begins, not as spectacle, but as the slow, merciful restoration of what should have been kept and what will now be kept again. Lamps trimmed and wicks straightened, soot lifted from bronze, ash gathered and carried out like a burden that finally finds the door. Water poured in a shining thread from a pitcher that is weighted in the corner, the entire place learning to breathe as if for the first time after a long fever, and even the stones seem to exhale the weariness of trampling and take into themselves the cool of a new morning. Imagine the priests of memory returning in silence, not to perform for an audience, but to keep a trust, feet moving like soft brushes over the floor, linen brushing stone, shoulders remembering their old grammar of labor, hands steady as they lift what had been thrown down. The table where bread once cooled to fragrance, the stand where a lamp once held its flame, the rails and hooks and rings that know the shape of devotion the way a palm knows the curve of a familiar tool, and see the small tasks multiply into peace, a basin rinsed until it returns the faces of those who bend above it, a veil shaken free of the fine ash of arrogance, a threshold washed where boots had scuffed their heavy impatience. Each act not merely cleaning but naming, this is holy, this is ours, this is given. And with each naming, the place remembers itself. Truth is not argued back into the world, it is lifted, unfolded, placed where it belongs, the way a scroll returns to its niche and a chord returns to the key that sets a choir at ease. And you can feel, as you watch with Daniel, that the sanctuary is not only a building in a vision, but a pattern of restoration available to any soul that has known interruption and now longs to keep its hours again. In that long tenderness, the light returns like water finding the bed of a river it had abandoned in flood, and the evenings and mornings resume their dialogue, the lamp in the hush of dusk, the faint silver of dawn visiting after the last star withdraws, each time a promise that the count has not been lost and never will be, and the fragrance of oil rises like a memory that is somehow new. Cedar and pressed olives, and a thread of frankincense barely noticeable until the heart responds and slows of its own accord, and you understand why Daniel, who had watched beasts break what they could not understand and horns lift themselves against what they could not own, rests here as if laid upon cool grass. Because the cleansing is not only the answer to the number, but the answer to fear. A demonstration that gentleness is stronger than desecration, that fidelity is more patient than pride, that the same hand that set the limit now sets the room in order without needing to explain itself, and the result is not triumph but health, not a parade but a home. There are the marks that will not quite vanish, a faint shadow where smoke once curled, a pale scar on a threshold where heat had licked its shape, and even these become teachers rather than irritations. Reminders not of defeat, but of rescue, as rings that once held curtains remind us that they also held them fast, as hooks that once hung empty now bear the weight of service again. And the people who enter this place discover that cleansing is not forgetting, but remembering rightly, that the story is not scrubbed until it has no lines, but arranged until the lines make music. And so the singers return with their gentle discipline, not to overwhelm, but to tune the room to the key of gratitude, harps drawn softly, breath placed carefully, the first note held like a bird cupped in two hands before it is released. And when it is released, it does not shout, it glows. It leans against the stones and changes the temperature of the air. And those who hear it sit a little taller without knowing why, and they begin to keep time with their breathing, and in that keeping they find they have been gathered. All this Daniel sees in the way a dream sees, without hurry, without the edges that waking sometimes insists upon. And the vision teaches him that cleansing is a craft, that holiness is maintained by small obediences accumulated like dew, that the greatest things are preserved by tasks so humble they are easily despised by the proud, trimming a wick, measuring flour, mending a tear before it becomes a rip. And as he watches, he understands also that the sanctuary is not only a place among stones and fabrics, but a geography within the chest, an inner court where the lamp is the attentive mind, the altar the consenting will, the incense the steady gratitude that rises without comment. And desecration there is rarely theatrical, it is simply neglect, a busyness that forgets to tend the flame, a noise that tramples the threshold until the door will not close. And cleansing there is the same gentleness, the decision to count our own evenings and mornings, to hold a time, to lift truth from the floor of our thoughts and set it back where it steadies us, to give thanks before we speak and after, to choose speech that leaves the veil unburned. It is not without cost, this return to order, and the vision does not pretend otherwise. For what was broken without hands must be acknowledged as broken, and what was cast down must be lifted by hands, now willing to be guided. And the small horn that once magnified itself in the shadow of the sanctuary must be named for what it is, wherever it appears. Not only in palaces and parliaments, but in the private posture of a person who begins to believe that the room is theirs alone. And the naming need not be harsh, it need only be honest. For arrogance cannot endure when seen truly. It shrinks back into its proper size and loses its appetite for trampling, while truth, once lifted, requires no defense. It simply stands and makes the air clean. And this is the secret strength of cleansing, that it does not exhaust itself in contest, but listens for the original pattern and restores it. And restoration changes what contest cannot touch. Now let the vision place you within this work as gently as it placed Daniel to watch. Let your breath become the measure of evenings and mornings. Let your thoughts arrive at the threshold and remove their sandals as those who enter a room kept for meeting. And feel how the body itself understands sanctuaries, shoulders lowering as burdens set themselves down, jaw loosening, hands unclenching, and the heart that has rehearsed its alarms, learning a slower drum. And in that slowness, the memories that troubled you begin to find their shelves, not denied, not erased, but filed where they are true and no longer tyrants. And the hopes that rattled against their cages are given a perch and a window. And the griefs that would not be managed are granted a place to lie down. And in this arrangement, nothing is lost, except the hurry that kept you from seeing that you were held. The count ends and begins again, for numbers in the sanctuary are not a wall, but a rhythm. and you can trust them because their keeper is not tired. The Ancient of Days whose seat Daniel saw in fire that warmed rather than consumed. The Prince of Princes whose dominion is given rather than grabbed. And under their gaze the cleansed place is not fragile but durable, not perfect but living, and living things endure storms by bending and rising. And so the lamps that were relit tonight will be trimmed again tomorrow, and the floor that was washed will bear tomorrow's feet. And this is not futility, but faithfulness, the holiness of maintenance, the miracle of consistency. And you may rest in it because rest here is not the absence of work, but the presence of trustworthy order. The knowledge that someone is keeping time and that you are invited to keep it too. So the vision lingers over bowls that shine, over cloth that hangs without scorch, over bread whose fragrance says, "We are expected," over a register where the smallest gift is recorded, because nothing is small in a room built for encounter, and it lingers over faces changed by the soft labor of repair. Eyes that look outward rather than inward, mouths that have learned again the grammar of blessing. And when at last the scene dims, it does not close like a door, but fades like music after the final chord, the resonance staying in the stones and in the chest of those who listened. And Daniel, who has watched beasts and kingdoms pass, sleeps because he has seen something that does not pass, a place kept, a people gathered, a light returned, and sleep comes easily to those who know what is tended will be tended again. And what is counted will be counted again, and what is cleansed will be kept clean as long as gratitude remembers its way to the table. And if, as you lie here, you wonder whether the cleansing belongs only to distant calendars and to rooms built of rare wood and hammered gold, the vision answers with the same patience that counted dawns and dusks. It belongs to you, to a heart that will choose to guard a quiet, to a mind that will set a little lamp of attention and shield it from drafts, to a mouth that will speak in a way that leaves the veil intact, 2 hands that will lift what others have dropped and say, "This is holy because it is given." And when you practice this keeping, you are already inside the sanctuary Daniel saw. And when you sleep after such keeping, you are already inside its peace. And the worlds that rear themselves like beasts and the horns that boast in their smallness cannot enter here, because their season is outside and their sound does not carry where light is returning. Block 10. The anchor of the cleansed sanctuary. There are visions that end like storms, with thunder rolling back into silence, and there are visions that end like songs, with the final chord still vibrating in the stone long after the musicians have gone. And Daniel's vision of the sanctuary cleansed belonged to this second kind, because though the beasts had risen, and the little horn had magnified itself, and desecration had bruised the sacred, the last sound that remained in his soul was not the roar of arrogance or the trampling of pride, but the soft steadiness of lamps relit, the quiet shimmer of vessels restored, the fragrance of offerings rising once more. And in that quiet there was not triumph but anchoring, not noise but stillness. The way a ship feels when its mooring rope finds the post, no longer drifting at the whim of tide, but resting in a place it can trust. And this anchoring became for Daniel not only the close of a vision, but the strength that steadied him for all the others that were yet to come. For though the visions were many, and their images, fierce lions and bears, leopards and beasts beyond naming, horns sprouting and breaking, numbers unfolding across evenings and mornings was this image of cleansing that returned to him in the hidden places of his heart, this picture of a sanctuary washed and kept, this knowledge that desecration has an end and truth has a dawn. Imagine him walking again through the courts of Babylon, hearing the boasts of rulers, the laughter of courtiers, the threats of soldiers, and beneath it all, carrying like a secret music the memory of oil poured upon wicks, of bread placed fresh upon tables, of stones exhaling after long trampling. He had seen that desecration cannot remain, that arrogance is broken without hands, that the sanctuary is always reclaimed, and this knowing, this anchor, turned even the loudest chambers of empire into rooms with limits, even the harshest decrees into voices that would one day fall silent. And it is the same for you, listening now, lying still in the hush of your own room. Because the cleansing is not only for visions written on parchment, but for the restless sanctuaries within each chest. You know the feeling of desecration when truth is trampled under hurry, when devotion is silenced by noise, when pride sets itself like a little horn upon the altar of your thoughts, swelling until stars themselves seem small. But you also know, deep as breath, that these desecrations are not endless, that even here there is a number, even here there is a count. And when the count is full, the sanctuary within you begins to breathe again. A lamp is trimmed, a prayer is whispered, a kindness is offered, a silence is kept. And little by little, the room within returns to its order, and in that order you find not triumph but peace, the kind of peace that does not shout but whispers, "You are home." Daniel's body trembled, yes, and he lay sick for days, unable to rise beneath the weight of what he had seen. But the cleansing remained in him as a strength that sickness could not touch, and when he rose, when he went again about the king's business, when he wrote decrees and interpreted signs and prayed in secret, he carried within him this image, this anchor, this sanctuary that no horn could trample forever. And this is why the visions did not break him though they shook him. This is why he endured though the images roared, because he knew that cleansing was not theory but certainty, not possibility but promise, not wish but inevitability, as sure as dawn follows night and as sure as the tide returns to the shore. Close your eyes now and feel that inevitability the way Daniel felt it. Picture your own inner sanctuary, perhaps dim, perhaps cluttered, perhaps silenced by days of noise. And imagine a hand that is not your own setting things back in order. The lamp relit, the altar cleared, the floor washed, the veil lifted, the fragrance of oil rising again, the voice of truth lifted from dust. And as you imagine this, notice how your breath becomes easier, how your body loosens, how your thoughts stop clawing at the walls and begin to sit quietly, like birds returning to their branches after a storm has passed. This is the cleansing promised in the vision, not only for Daniel but for you, not only for sanctuaries built in stone but for sanctuaries built in spirit. And it comes not with trumpets but with silence, not with armies but with gentleness, not with hurry but with patience. And it comes because the Eternal has already numbered the nights and already written the dawn. The beasts may rise again, the horns may speak again, the arrogance may lengthen again, but the cleansing remains as anchor. The memory of lamps relit remains as anchor. The fragrance of bread upon the table remains as anchor. And these anchors are enough to keep a soul steady in storms, enough to let a body lie down in peace, enough to allow eyes to close without fear of what prowls beyond the walls, because you know that desecration is only ever temporary and restoration is eternal. Daniel learned it in vision. You may learn it now in rest. So let yourself sink into that rest as into cool water after long heat. Let the sanctuary within you breathe. Let the lamp burn. Let the altar stand. Let truth rise from the ground, and let the quiet of this vision anchor you the way it anchored Daniel, steadying you not only for this night, but for all the nights yet to come. And as your breath slows, as your eyelids grow heavy, let the last sound within you be not the roar of beasts, nor the boasting of horns, but the soft, steady song of a sanctuary cleansed, lamps shining, truth rising, peacekeeping watch. Block 11. The 70 weeks and the slow unfolding of time. There are visions that reveal beasts and thrones, visions heavy with terror and fire. And then there are visions that arrive clothed not in the roar of empires, but in the patient fabric of numbers. Visions that speak not of monsters rising from seas, but of days counted like beads sliding one by one through fingers. A vision given to Daniel when he sought with fasting and with prayer, when his body was weak but his heart was lifted, when he bowed not to kings but to heaven and confessed not only his own need but the need of his people. And in that long humility an answer was given, not as an instant end to exile but as a chart of time itself, 70 weeks determined, a number that stretched across centuries like a thread glimmering in moonlight, showing that the rhythm of God's work is not chaos but count, not accident but appointment, not random tide but carefully measured breath. Picture Daniel kneeling upon the stone of his chamber, window open toward Jerusalem, though its ruins lay far away. Lips moving in a whisper that trembled between sorrow and hope, his forehead near the dust, his heart aching for mercy, his words confessing not only his own frailty but the rebellion of a people who had turned from law and covenant. And as he prayed, he felt himself small and yet not forgotten, and into that prayer Gabriel came again, not with noise but with swiftness, not with armies but with clarity, touching Daniel with the same gentleness as before, speaking words that would steady him for the long corridors of history. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city, he said, and the words fell into Daniel's heart like drops into thirsty ground. Weeks of years, time stretching far beyond his lifetime, yet framed, measured, bounded, not endless night but a dawn already written. And within those weeks lay the cleansing, the atonement, the end of transgression, the sealing of vision and prophecy, and the anointing of the Most Holy. The numbers unfolded like layers of silence. 7 weeks, 62 weeks, one final week, divisions of time, each carrying a weight of promise, the rebuilding of the city, the coming of an anointed one, the cutting off, the covenant confirmed, the sacrifice ceased, and desolation until decreed end. And though the details were heavy, though the arithmetic stretched further than Daniel could walk, the vision spoke more than mathematics. It spoke of purpose, of history not abandoned to chance, of time itself being carried as carefully as a child in arms. And for Daniel this was enough, more than enough, to know that even centuries are kept, that even suffering has an end, that even waiting is a form of being counted. Let yourself now linger in that thought as Daniel lingered, that history is not a shapeless river rushing nowhere but a measured flow, a stream with banks, a tide with appointed turnings, that the days of exile, the days of silence, the days of desecration are all gathered within a number. And that number belongs not to kings, nor to beasts, nor to horns, but to the one who speaks and counts and keeps. And when the count is finished, what is promised arrives, no sooner, no later, but exactly. And the precision itself becomes a kind of lullaby, because in knowing that time is kept, you no longer need to keep it with fear. You need only breathe and wait and trust that 70 weeks are 70 weeks, that evenings and mornings are evenings and mornings, that what has been decreed will be fulfilled as surely as dawn follows night. Daniel's body trembled under this vision as under others, for numbers can be as heavy as beasts when they stretch beyond the span of mortal strength. But in the heaviness there was also peace, for he had asked for mercy and he was shown a schedule of mercy. He had asked for forgiveness and he was given a map of atonement. He had asked for restoration and he was told that restoration was not forgotten, only unfolding at a pace too vast for one life to measure. And this is perhaps the greatest gentleness of prophecy, that it lifts us from the prison of our own short hours and shows us that the eternal keeps time not as we do, but better, more faithfully, more tenderly, never hurried, never delayed, always exact, always merciful. So now, as you breathe in your own night, think of your hours not as accidents, but as beads upon a cord, each one counted, each one kept, each one strung with care, and know that your days too are within the 70 weeks, within the appointed purposes, within the patient arithmetic of heaven, and you are not lost, you are not forgotten, you are not wandering in a darkness without measure, for the one who counted 70 weeks has also counted you, has written your name within the scroll of days, has kept your breath within his rhythm, and if you let that thought rest upon you, you will feel the same anchor Daniel felt, the same stillness that comes when beasts roar and horns boast, but you know their time is short, when desecration profanes, but you know cleansing is near, when sorrow stretches, but you know it has a number, and numbers end. Gabriel's words faded, Daniel's prayer ended. The night closed upon its silence, but within that silence the weeks continued their march, unseen yet certain, and Daniel slept not because the world was light, but because he had been shown that light was scheduled. And sleep comes easily to those who trust that dawn is already appointed, that its hour has already been set, and that nothing can keep the sun from rising when its count is complete. Block 12. The long conflict of North and South. There are visions that rise like sudden storms, tearing the horizon open with flashes of fire, and there are visions that move like rivers, slow and winding, bending again and again through valleys of time until the listener feels the centuries flow past as if they were the minutes before sleep. And Daniel was shown such a river when his heart had grown heavy with wondering, when his lips had spent themselves in prayer and his eyes were dimmed by the strain of days. And the messenger who came to him did not come lightly, for the vision that followed was not a fragment or a fleeting glimpse, but an unrolling of history itself. Empires colliding like tides, rulers rising like waves, kingdoms splitting like wood beneath the axe, the long, weary struggle of North against South, not once, not twice, but again and again, until the repetition itself became its own message, that power is restless, that ambition is circular, that kings are born only to die, and their victories are thin garments torn by the next hand to grasp them. Daniel's body trembled, his strength nearly gone, yet he was held up by the touch of one sent from heaven, told that from the days of Persia onward, the river of history would not cease its turning. For kings rising, the fourth greater than all, stirring up the realm against Greece, then a mighty king rising who would rule with vast dominion and do according to his will, but whose kingdom would be broken, divided toward the four winds, not to his posterity, but scattered, its strength dispersed, and from those fragments new struggles would be born. The king of the south, growing strong, one of his princes, rising with great dominion. Then leagues formed, alliances broken, daughters given and betrayed, treasures seized, fortresses taken, armies marched, not once but again and again, like tides that refuse to stay at rest. Imagine Daniel hearing all this with eyes half closed, the vision unfolding like a scroll without end, battle upon battle, North pressing against South, South rising against North, victories temporary, defeats recycled, ambition unquenched, each triumph already carrying the seed of its undoing. The details poured like water campaigns, treaties, betrayals, fortifications, treasures of gold and silver heaped high and then carried away, suns stirred up only to fall, kings lifted up only to stumble, chariots and horsemen and ships filling the vision with noise that Daniel himself did not hear but felt. For in visions, sound is not always needed when the weight of inevitability presses heavy upon the chest. He saw empires stretch their hands across lands and seas, only to find those hands empty when the wheel turned again, and he understood, as you may now, that history's noise is often a loop, not a line, a circle of striving, a repetition of pride dressed in new garments. And yet, in the endless march of north and south, there was always a limit, always a decree, always a point where pride was stopped, where armies fell, where kings were consumed not by their enemies but by time itself. This too was part of the vision, that no ambition endures, that no throne is forever, that power, however vast, is fragile as breath. The king of the north would rise, yes, and do great things, enter the glorious land, set his hand against sanctuaries, magnify himself above gods, speak astonishing things, prosper for a time, but only for a time. Because the vision was clear, the end is appointed. He would plant the tents of his palace between the seas and the glorious holy mountain. He would spread his dominion like a cloak over lands, but he would come to his end, and none would help him, and that sentence, quiet, inevitable, unadorned, carried more weight than all the noise of battles. Because endings whispered by eternity are heavier than victories shouted by men. Let the flow of this vision move through you as through Daniel, slowly, inevitably, until you feel the weight of centuries pressing like a tide against the shore of your own night. Kings rise and fall, treaties form and fail, wars are fought and forgotten, and still the river flows, patient, unhurried, unstoppable. You need not hold the details, the names, the dates, the treasures and betrayals, for they are many and they slip away like sand between fingers. Hold only the rhythm, the endless circling of pride and its fall, the repetition of ambition and its breaking, the certainty that all the noise of history is bounded by the silence of decree, that every throne has its hour and every horn has its limit, that kingdoms rise only to fall, and that their end is already written. For you to have heard the noise of history, wars, rulers, powers clashing and boasting out, perhaps you have felt the tremor of it within yourself, the anxiety that the world is only noise without meaning, only conflict without peace. But Daniel's vision, though heavy, whispers otherwise, that history is not endless chaos, that every clash of north and south is already numbered, that every prideful boast already carries its ending. And if you let this whisper rest upon you, you will feel the calm that Daniel found even as his body shook, the calm of knowing that the river of time is not ownerless, that the wheel of history does not turn without an axis, that the end of pride is already appointed, that desecration cannot endure, that truth, however trampled, rises again, as it did when the sanctuary was cleansed. So lie still now, let the images pass like waves, armies marching, treaties breaking, kings shouting, palaces rising and falling, and let the refrain linger in your mind. The end is appointed, not by men, not by beasts, not by horns, but by the one who numbers evenings and mornings, who counts weeks and seasons, who sets limits on arrogance and boundaries on ambition. And as you let that refrain settle, your breath will slow, your heart will ease, your body will sink deeper into the quiet, for you are resting not in the chaos of history but in the certainty of its end, and in that certainty there is peace, the kind of peace that closes eyes, loosens hands, and carries you gently towards sleep. Block 13. The vision of the end and the awakening of the dust. There are visions that speak of beasts and horns and kingdoms passing like clouds, and there are visions that lift the curtain higher still. Beyond empires, beyond wars of north and south, beyond desecrations and cleansings, visions that open upon the end of all things mortal, the last chapter written before the dawn of what does not pass. And Daniel, weary yet faithful, was shown such a vision in his later days, when his hair was white with years, and his body bowed by exile, but his eyes still opened when heaven beckoned, and in one last night the veil parted once more, and he was carried into the landscape of the end. The messenger spoke again, a voice not hurried but steady, reminding Daniel that there shall come a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. A time when distress would press upon the earth like the weight of 1,000 storms, when kingdoms would rage, when arrogance would climb, when sanctuaries would be tested, when pride would speak louder than ever before. And yet within that terror there was promise, for at that time Michael, the great prince who stands watch over the children of the people, would arise, not in noise, not in boasting, but in guardianship, in defense, in the quiet strength of one who keeps what is entrusted to him. And many who sleep in the dust of the earth would awaken, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise would shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars for ever and ever. Daniel heard this and trembled, for he knew that this vision stretched far beyond his years, far beyond his exile, far beyond the span of his mortal breath. And yet the words settled upon him like a cloak of comfort, for in them he saw that even dust is not forgotten, that sleep is not the end, that death itself is but another evening waiting for its morning. And when the count is finished, when the number is complete, the morning will come, the sleepers will rise, the wise will shine, and truth will be not only restored, but eternal. Imagine lying now with Daniel in the quiet of this vision, feeling the dust beneath your own body, the dust that one day will claim you, and hearing in that dust the whisper of promise that even here, even in soil, you are counted, even in silence, you are known, even in death, you are not lost. The messenger told Daniel to seal the book until the time of the end, for knowledge would increase, and many would run to and fro, seeking, striving, restless as the sea. But the vision was already complete, the words already written, the count already kept. And Daniel, weary, longed for clarity, asked how long these things would be, how the end would unfold. But the answer returned as always, not with haste, not with full detail, but with boundaries, with numbers, with the calm assurance that time is measured, that days are decreed, that endings are already appointed. A time, times, and half a time, a number known to heaven, if not to him, a measure kept by the eternal, not to confuse but to steady, reminding him again and again that all things are bounded, all things counted, 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 in them emdes input in their imponent with them hours command of conpond or empor ima to one see or what and of can what have been what ifs or would be main. Men but it will you were but if I'm one out the I para to mato And in that vision Daniel saw the river of fire become also a river of life, flowing not with judgment alone, but with renewal, with the promise that dust shall awaken, that the wise shall shine, that righteousness shall outlast pride, that stars shall not be trampled, but multiplied in brightness. And this was more than prophecy. It was lullaby, more than terror, it was hope. For who can fear beasts when dust itself is promised resurrection? Who can tremble at horns when the stars themselves are promised as inheritance to those who keep wisdom? Who can despair in exile when even the grave is shown to be only a pause, only a sleep, only an evening awaiting its morning? Daniel lay still, faint with the weight of the vision, his body unable to carry what his soul had seen, But the messenger touched him, strengthened him, lifted him, told him to go his way, for the words were sealed until the time of the end, and he would rest, and he would stand in his allotted place at the end of days. These words, simple, quiet, final, carried more peace than all the interpretations before, because they spoke not only of kingdoms and beasts and horns, not only of desecrations and cleansings, but of Daniel himself, of his rest, of his awakening, of his allotted place. And in that personal promise, the vastness of prophecy became intimate, became a hand upon the shoulder, became the assurance that even one man, one exile, one dreamer, is not forgotten in the tide of history. So let the vision now cradle you as it cradled him. Imagine the dust beneath you, soft, cool, quiet, and hear within it the whisper that dust is not the end, that one day the dust will awaken, that one day the sleepers will rise, that one day wisdom will shine like the sky, that one day truth will be more than restored it, will be forever. Let your breath slow with that promise. Let your body sink into rest with that assurance. Let your mind ease with the knowledge that you too are counted, you too are kept, you too have an allotted place. And as you drift into sleep, let the final sound within you be not the roar of beasts nor the boasting of horns, but the gentle whisper of dust awaiting its dawn, the soft certainty that the end is already appointed, and that beyond the end lies only everlasting morning. Block 14. Michael stands, and the last struggle. There are names that carry the weight of silence, names that are less spoken than felt, names that when whispered into the hush of night seem to fill the air with a strength older than stone. And in Daniel's final vision that name was spoken: Michael, the great prince, the guardian, the one who stands watch, not seated, not reclining, but standing, alert, steadfast, unshaken, present in the hour when kingdoms collapse and pride magnifies itself beyond measure, when beasts rage and horns speak arrogantly, when nations rise like tides and fall like foam, when desecration stretches its hand toward the sanctuary and time itself bends beneath the strain of trouble. Daniel was told that in that time, that appointed hour when distress would be greater than any distress, since nations first drew breath, Michael would stand, not to seize glory for himself, but to defend, not to magnify, but to guard, not to boast, but to shelter. His very standing a declaration that heaven does not abandon the earth in its darkest hour, that even when shadows grow to cover mountains and seas, there is one who keeps watch. The vision unfolded slowly, not with noise, but with inevitability. And Daniel saw that the end was not a sudden flame extinguishing the world, but a long struggle, a weaving of north and south, a raging of kings, a magnifying of arrogance, a trampling of truth, a silencing of devotion, and yet above it all the figure of Michael remained, unmoved, the great prince watching, guarding, steady as a mountain while storms break upon its sides. And in that steadiness lay hope, for the trouble was real and vast, but so too was the presence of the guardian. Nations would clash, rulers would boast, desecration would darken the sanctuary, but Michael's standing declared that darkness is never unchallenged, that arrogance never goes unanswered, that even in the time of greatest trouble there is one who keeps the faithful as stars are kept in their orbits. And Daniel was shown further that this struggle was not only upon the earth, but in the heavens. Battles not seen by mortal eyes, conflicts waged in silence between those who would devour and those who would defend. And Michael stood there too, the defender of those whose names were written, the protector of those who rested in trust, the champion not of empires but of exiles, not of kings but of captives, not of the proud but of the meek. And this knowledge soothed Daniel more than numbers, more than visions of beasts, because it told him that though kingdoms might rage and sanctuaries be profaned, he and his people were not forgotten, that above every throne sat a higher throne, and beside every trembling exile stood a guardian unseen. Imagine now the hush of this vision pressing upon you as it pressed upon Daniel. Imagine the weight of nations raging, the roar of armies marching, the boasting of horns swelling, and then imagine Michael, silent, steady, standing, his presence like a tower in a flood, his gaze like a star that does not blink, his watch like the breath of eternity itself. Let that image rest upon you, for in it is peace, the peace of knowing that guardianship is real, that defense is constant, that standing is enough. Michael does not rush, does not strike with noise, does not need to parade his strength. His very being, his very posture, declares that arrogance has limits, that trouble has boundaries, that even the greatest storm cannot sweep away those who are kept in the hands of heaven. Daniel heard then of the awakening of the dust, of the wise shining like the brightness of the sky, of the righteous shining like stars forever. And he knew that this final struggle was not the end, but the beginning. Not a night without morning, but the last night before an eternal dawn. And though the words trembled in his heart, though his body weakened beneath the vision, the promise gave him strength. He was told to seal the book, to keep the words until the time of the end, to rest in his allotted portion, to know that though the struggle was fast, the end was certain, the awakening inevitable, the shining already decreed. And in that certainty Daniel found the anchor of peace, enough to carry him into sleep, enough to carry him into rest, enough to carry him until his own dust would awaken. So let the image of Michael standing be the last image you hold tonight. Not the roar of beasts, not the boasting of horns, not the rage of kings, but the quiet strength of a guardian who does not abandon his post, who stands while others fall, who watches when others sleep, who keeps when others scatter. Let his steadiness become your own, let his silence soothe your fears. Let his presence anchor your breath, slow and deep, until the troubles of the day dissolve like mist before the sun. For though there is struggle, though there is distress, though there is trouble unlike any before, there is also this Michael stands, the guardian remains, the book is sealed but the promise is open, the dust sleeps but it will awaken, the wise wait but they will shine. And in that assurance, you too may rest, your body sinking into the quiet, your mind loosening its grip, your soul settling like dust waiting for dawn, for the same hand that kept Daniel keeps you. The same guardian who stood then stands now, the same promise spoken then is spoken still, and the same end that was appointed is already written. Sleep in that knowledge, for it is enough. Block 15. Daniel's rest and the closing of the book. There are endings that arrive with clamor, with the noise of horns and the weight of armies, and there are endings that arrive with gentleness, with the folding of pages and the dimming of lamps, with the hand of a scribe pausing upon the scroll before laying down his pen. And Daniel's visions ended in such a way, not with beasts still raging, nor horns still boasting, not with desecration silencing the sanctuary, nor kings clashing in restless ambition, but with the quiet promise that he, too, would rest, that his body would return to the dust, that his name would be kept within the book, and that in the appointed time he would awaken to stand in his allotted place at the end of days. After visions that shook the heavens and the earth, after dreams of statues shattered and beasts rising from seas, after words written upon plaster and horns swelling with arrogance, after numbers counted and sanctuaries cleansed, the final word was not terror but tenderness. Rest. Rest until the morning, written in eternity. Rest until the 70 weeks and the evenings and mornings are complete. Rest until the dust awakens and the wise shine like stars. Daniel's heart trembled as it had before, but this trembling was different. not the weakness of fear, but the loosened trembling of surrender. Like the body that has held itself rigid too long and finally lies down. Like a traveler who has carried burdens for miles and finally finds a place to set them down. He had asked questions, he had sought meanings, he had begged to understand the length and depth of the visions shown to him. And though many answers had come, some were still sealed, some kept 4 times beyond him, and yet it was enough. For the promise given was not to understand all things, but to rest within the keeping of the one who understands, to trust that time is counted, that endings are appointed, that resurrection is certain. And so he was told, you shall rest, and then you shall stand. 2 movements, simple and eternal rest, then rise, sleep, then awaken, dust, then star, silence, then song. Imagine him, old and tired, parchment and ink before him, the glow of a lamp softening the hard lines of exile's years. The scroll rolled gently closed, the words sealed, and his eyes lifting once more toward the window open to Jerusalem's direction. Ruins still scattered, but promises still alive. And in that gaze he knows that he will not live to see the rebuilding, that his body will not return to the homeland he loves. But he also knows that the homeland itself is only a shadow of the greater promise, that the true return is not to walls of stone, but to a kingdom without end, that the true awakening is not of city gates, but of dust itself, that he will stand again, not in Babylon, not in ruins, but in the presence of the Ancient of Days, clothed in light, shining like the firmament. And with that knowledge, rest is no longer heavy, no longer fearful. It is a gift, a gentle closing of the eyes in trust that the dawn will come. And so now, as you listen to the last notes of his visions, let them soften into your own rest. Let the images of beasts and horns dissolve into the certainty of limits. Let the desecrations fade into the assurance of cleansing. Let the long struggles of kings pass into the knowledge that their ends are already appointed. And let the final whisper be this: you shall rest, and then you shall stand. Rest is given to you, not as escape, but as promise, and promise is stronger than fear. Sleep is given to you, not as darkness, but as preparation, and preparation is brighter than doubt. Dust itself is kept, counted, remembered, and will awaken in its hour. And if Daniel, after all his visions, after all his trembling, was given peace, so too may you be given peace, here, now, tonight. So close your eyes as he did, let your breath deepen, let your body loosen its burdens, let your heart release its questions, and rest in the assurance that your name too is written, your days too are counted, your place too is kept. Rest, for the Ancient of Days remains enthroned. Rest, for Michael still stands guard. Rest, for the sanctuary has been cleansed. Rest, for the dust will awaken. Rest, for wisdom will shine. Rest, for the morning is already written. And when your own end comes, when your dust lies down, you too shall awaken, you too shall shine, you too shall stand in your allotted place at the end of days. And before you drift fully into sleep, carried as Daniel was carried, I invite you gently, softly, with no urgency, to leave a trace of your presence here as he once left his upon parchment. If this story has calmed your heart, you may like this video, or leave a comment about which vision stirred your wonder most, or share it with someone who longs for peace in their own night, or subscribe so that each new journey finds you when rest is needed again. Do so if you wish, not as duty but as devotion, not as noise but as the quiet keeping of fellowship. And now, let the book close, let the lamp dim, let the breath steady, and let sleep draw you gently into its embrace, where visions turn to dreams, and dreams turn to stars, and stars turn to the eternal morning already waiting beyond the veil of night.